me that this government has probably outperformed any other government before. I say so with pride, because last financial year, we closed the financial year without any outstanding exchequer releases to the counties, even though the last disbursement was done on the 29th of June. But again, the counties do not wait for the exchequer to initiate transactions. So you'll find by the time the financial year comes to a close, they have already procured. And when they get the money, then they do the payment. So it is the payment that is awaiting the funds. And also the salary for June will be paid immediately they get exchequer. So usually there is no inordinate delay. And that is why I'm saying, if you have been keen in following, there has been reduced complaints from the county governments in terms of delay in exchequer releases and many others. And by the way, even national government, there is a delay in release of funds. As we speak today, I have a number of MDAs which have requisitions with the exchequer. One of them is Interior, which wants to be supported, and we will also support them the same way we will be supporting counties. We usually give counties priority, by the way. It may not be known, but I know from where I sit that anytime we are making cash disbursements, every week that I get exchequer request approval, I always ask how far we are with the release to counties. So there is no deliberate effort or attempt to try to starve counties of funds. It would not be in my interest. I have never supported that route at all, because I'm schooled from a political persuasion that believes in devolution, and that is the ODM party. Now, a question by Senator Eddie Okech on yes, in the budget committee, which used to deal a lot with implementation of budget, and we were able to see some of these things. So missing documents, there are a number of reasons. Sometimes the mistake, a lot of times, the mistake is on the accounting entity, where when the government officers appear before the accountability committees, then all of a sudden the documents are there. So either it is because of the accounting officers just being negligent, or you also find that the the auditor who was auditing actually was given these documents, but the supervisor overruled any additional information. So the documents are there, but they were not factored in the final audit report. We haven't encountered those. And I think something needs to be done to streamline that. But you can see consistently audit queries are coming.
Okech, what is your intervention, Senator Okech?
Mr. Speaker, you know, we are asking these questions in context of the mother question, which the mother question is the question asked by Senator Amida, where there have been adverse audit queries that have been put as such by the Auditor General. My question on the documentation is this: where there has been
to these counties that are persistent material breaches, the rest will follow. I think that is the expectation we have from him. The rest will follow. I think that is the expectation we have from him as a Senate.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with Senator Sifuna. We rarely agree nowadays, but although we used to agree a lot a few months back. So today I want to agree with you that actually that Article 225 was not just put there in vain. But remember, Senator Sifuna, we have discussed this and we have said, let me get a recommendation from the Senate to stop any funds. Because again, you see, as National Treasury, I don't also want to appear in the face of it like a rogue cabinet secretary. You know, when you stop funds to a county, it's a major decision. And it has political implications, it has social implications, it has economic implications. So it's not something that I would just do even if there are material breaches, I would expect the Senate, through the committee where Senator Sifuna, I believe you still sit in the committee chaired by Senator Kajwang. If I get recommendations, even on one county or two, then we will deal with it based on the provisions of the law. I am not afraid to deal with it because it is the resources of the people of Kenya that we are protecting. So I agree, again, I want to repeat, I agree with Senator for Nairobi. We rarely do nowadays, but this is one of those rare occasions.
Very well. Senator Wambua, what is your intervention?
It's a good thing to hear that the CS is agreeing with Senator Sifuna. But no CS beyond just agreeing with Senator Sifuna. There's a fact that we seem to be running away from. Mr. Speaker, the CS Treasury is perhaps the only CS in the cabinet who has executive powers to manage economic and fiscal policies, of course with parliamentary oversight. The question that I asked about exchequer releases and related to the disbursement schedules that Senator Sifuna talked about, I was expecting a response that provides a way forward, not a response that says we have improved. Because improve what? What's the improvement? I expect to hear that before we hold the county government of Kitui to account for mismanaging their finances, those finances were made available to them in good time to make financial decisions, to roll out projects, and now you have messed it. The CS, I just said as I conclude, has said that he needs a name. He just needs a letter, communication from the Senate to stop disbursements to a single county as a lesson to others that are misbehaving. Now, Speaker, if my memory serves me right, just a few months ago, Meru was on the table of the Treasury. There was a move against Meru to stop disbursements. And I'm not saying you should, because when you stop disbursements, what it means is that you're punishing the people of that county on account of misdeeds of one individual called a governor. But that matter came before the Treasury. What decision was taken? They said, no, we cannot touch this. So, Speaker, let's not just respond to questions by ticking boxes. Let's give responses, especially from the CS Treasury, with executive power, responses that provide a way forward for devolution and for this country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, indeed, I want to agree with Senator Wambua that CS National Treasury has some executive powers. I thank the people of Kenya for making me that cabinet secretary now, and the president. But again, the power is with the people. Actually, the absolute power is with the people, not even executive, the cabinet secretary. So as you exercise that power that you have, you must exercise it with caution. And you must understand that it has implications. And that is what I'm trying to do, so that later on, I am not accused as one of those cabinet secretaries who sat at the National Treasury and became rogue. Now, regarding, I think we should not mix these two issues. There is the issue of exchequer releases, which is a substantive issue and is a critical one, and the issue of mismanagement of resources at the county. In fact, if money has not been received by counties, it cannot be mismanaged, because they don't have money to mismanage anyway. So we are talking about counties which receive money and they mismanage the money or the funds that they receive. These are the counties that we are saying we need to deal with. And there should be some resolution somehow, somewhere. And yes, we did with Meru. Meru, there was a persistent breach, not just by the county executive, but even by the county assembly, which committed to provide resources to settle a debt that was already creating a diplomatic issue between this country and another country. So I took the action that we did, and that triggered some response. Because before I even took that action, Mr. Speaker, I will tell you, we wrote to the county and there were no response. The moment we took that action, there was quick and immediate response. And so we will deal with any other county which becomes rogue, including Homa Bay County, where I come from, if they decide to mismanage resources that belong to the people, and there is evidence that there are material breaches, persistent, without change, and it is reported to me, and we look at the law, and the law supports the cause of withholding funds, I will do it. And by the way, that power, even though Senator Wamboa calls it executive, it is still subjected to the Senate scrutiny and consideration, because the power belongs to the people, and the people have their representatives. They have their mouthpiece. The people of Migori has Eddie Okech to speak for them in this space. I don't have that power. In fact, people have not delegated that power to me. It used to be delegated to me somehow about 2 years ago. Nowadays, I don't have that delegated power anymore. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, we have to proceed and go to the next question, question number 28, by Senator Professor Tom Ojienda, Senior Counsel. If I could guide you, Professor, ask your 2 questions, and then the Cabinet Secretary will reply to both.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have 2 questions, question number 28 and question number 29. Question number 28, addressed to the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Economic Planning. Part A, could the Cabinet Secretary outline the fiscal and other policy interventions by the government to address the slow growth in agriculture, construction and services sector, and its ripple effect on employment levels and county-level fiscal performance, amongst others? Part B, could the Cabinet Secretary also outline the safeguards in place to ensure that the government's fiscal consolidation program does not undermine the state's obligation under Article 43 of the Constitution, which guarantees specific economic and social rights to every person? Question number 29, Part A, could the Cabinet Secretary provide information on Kenya's current stock of domestic and external debt and disclose the debt to GDP ratio? Part B, what measures are in place to ensure that funds to outcomes across the country? Part C, could the National Treasury consider developing a publicly accessible tracker that links each debt facility to its corresponding development outcomes? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. At least, Mr. Speaker, these 2 questions I have tried to condense them into 5 pages, so I will move quickly through them. Mr. Speaker, the first question is about intervention that the government is taking to address the slowed growth across various sectors of the economy. I want to state, Mr. Speaker, that in our 2026-27 economic outlook, we are preparing, or we prepared our budgets, which have been shaped by heightened global uncertainty following the outbreak of conflict in the Middle East in late February 2026. But in addition to this, we are just recovering from drought, and we are still dealing with the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war. These conflicts have disrupted global commodity markets and weakened investor confidence. We have seen from February the investment in the Nairobi Securities Exchange going down. So the gains that we have realized before are being reversed from strong, are being reversed. But even though the global outlook remains fragile, with risks tilted to the downside, particularly from potential escalation of the conflict, I hope the recent indications will continue that the war is likely to end, and disruptions of critical energy transit routes, such as the Strait of Hormuz, Consequently, the global growth has been projected downwards to 3.1% in 2026 from 3.2%, from 3.4% on average. But Kenya's economy still continues to demonstrate resilience despite facing these elevated external risks. So in 2025, even though our economy grew at a lower pace compared to 2024, that is 4.6% compared to the 4.7% the previous year, it's cooled a bit. All the sectors registered positive growth. I wanted to mention that. All the sectors registered positive growth. Unlike 2024, when we had a number of sectors which registered negative growth, like construction sector, mining and mining sector, all the sectors in 2025 registered positive growth. Some at a slower rate, of course. Worst it was agriculture, because in the final quarter of the year, agriculture slowed drastically because of the drought that began in September. So the growth outlook of 2026 continued to be affected by these external risks, which are transmitted through higher global oil prices that rose from an average of $63 US per barrel to $103 US per barrel, thereby increasing inflation and again putting pressure on our foreign exchange, although we are very lucky because we had taken steps to have enough forex reserve which has cushioned the shilling. We have not seen a depreciation of the shilling as it would have happened. Against this backdrop, we have revised our economic outlook downwards to 5% from 5.3% that had been earlier indicated. So in terms of steps that we are taking to support the growth outlook, to be able to make sure that all the sectors grow, the government has sustained a strong reform agenda, which is aimed at enhancing stability, promoting recovery, and safeguarding livelihoods. We are guided still by the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, where we are doing agricultural transformation and inclusive growth, micro, small, and medium enterprises, housing and settlement, universal healthcare, and digital superhighway and creative economy. I have summarized my response to this question, Mr. Speaker, because I just didn't want to bring a controversy here. But I understand this question Senator Ojenda raised before I gave my budget speech. If you look at my budget speech, which is now a public document, there is detailed approach on how to revive almost every sector of the economy. So I didn't want to again reproduce that speech on this in response to this question. On the issue of debts, I want to state, Mr. Speaker, that the current debt stock of domestic and external debt and debt to GDP ratio of as at 2026 February is as follows. The stock of public and publicly guaranteed debt stood at about 12.842 trillion, which is equivalent to 69% of GDP as at the end of February 2026. The public debt comprises a mix of domestic debt is 7 trillion and external debt is 5.779 trillion. What measures are we putting in place to ensure that funds raised through borrowing are utilized effectively and translate into tangible development outcomes across the country? Mr. Speaker, the government committed to efficient use of all funds obtained through public borrowing. In this regard, the National Treasury has implemented several measures to ensure that expenditures from borrowed funds contribute to meaningful development nationwide. One is the enabling legal framework, that is Article 201B of the Constitution, and I don't want to read it again. Additionally, Section 15.2 of the Public Finance Management Act of Cap 412A of 2012 mandates the national government borrowing to be solely used for financing development expenditure. The government remains committed to complying with these legal provisions. Then we have robust PFM systems, the IFMI system. This system ensures that funds, including borrowed resources, are used as appropriated by the National Assembly and for the designated purposes. Then we have program-based budgeting. Now we are moving to zero-based budgeting. This is the first year that we have started implementing zero-based budgeting. on the development of a publicly accessible tracker that links each debt facility to its corresponding development outcomes. The National Treasury is developing the Development Partners Management Information System, and this, I also spoke to it in my budget speech, which is a one-stop digital platform designed to enhance transparency, coordination, and accountability in the management of external resources. The system will track each debt facility and grant, linking it to the specific development projects and their corresponding outcomes across sectors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, and thank you for summarizing your answer in a very effective way. Honorable Senators, I'll be taking, Senator Ojenda, sorry, do you have any supplementary question?
Chair, given the fact that the CS has indicated that he has a full menu of the responses on the guidelines in the budget speech, I think I will pay a visit to the CS so that I can get the full text summarized. It deals with other issues. Thank you.
Professor, I am sure you are aware that it's probably online and you can access it without visiting the Cabinet Secretary.
I will save him time because he's an expert and my former party leader.
Very well. Honorable Senators, I'll be taking supplementary questions. May I remind the Senators who are going to ask the question to stick to the primary question raised. Don't go out of topic. And because of time also, keep your questions short and precise so that the Cabinet Secretary can have time to reply. Senator Okech.
Chair, thank you. You know, the CS has spoken about very serious numbers here, Chair. And there are two numbers that have drawn my attention, which now lead to my question. The first number is 7 trillion of public debt in the domestic market, and then the issue of the 69% debt to GDP ratio, which just shows a very aggressive, public debt servicing. Yet, Bwana CS, you have not mentioned that you have been facing serious, stagnation in revenue collection. So my question is this, Bwana CS. How are you going to balance your lack of meeting your revenue collection with this aggressive public debt servicing to be able to protect domestic businesses that you're going to crowd out with that 7 trillion number? Because in your presentation in the budget in National Assembly, you indicated a deficit of about 1.1 trillion. And you're going to go strongly on domestic borrowing. How are you going to help this farmer from Migori in the agricultural sector who cannot be able to borrow from domestic market to be able to put cages in the lake? These domestic businesses that you're crowding out, what is the strategy that you're going to have in this financial year to make sure that they can be able to also get credit from the private sector? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sifuna.
Again, Waziri, the problem that I have with some of these responses is that they actually don't answer the question that has been asked by the Senator. Speaker, I want to take you to the response to question number, just a minute, question number 28 by Professor Ojenda. And the response at page 5, for instance, when the CS is addressing the question of manufacturing. As you know, I was in Thika just this weekend, and growing up, we knew Thika to be an industrial town. You will see in the response there the CS saying that to revitalize manufacturing, the government is implementing a strategy aimed at lowering the cost of production. And if you go to bullet number 5 there, he talks about improved access to affordable energy and infrastructure for industrial enterprises. Now, Speaker, go to the very next paragraph, paragraph 13, where now we are talking about affordable energy. And the CS says the government has prioritized stabilization. Prioritizing stabilization cannot be what lowers the cost of energy, Honorable Speaker. If you look across the continent of Africa, Kenya has one of the highest rates of cost in terms of the amount it takes for you to buy 1 kilowatt hour. We have one of the highest in the region. We are doing upwards of 33 shillings per kilowatt hour. Compared to our neighbors, Ethiopia is actually doing less than a shilling per kilowatt hour. Tanzania is doing better, 22. Tanzania is doing 12, Uganda 23 shillings, Rwanda is doing 27 shillings. So when you talk about lowering the cost of energy, which is a key ingredient in lowering the cost of production and encouraging manufacturing, our priority cannot be stabilization. And I remember, because I'm a member of the Energy Committee, we fought when we were being told that there was a PPP for Adani to stabilize electricity supply, and they wanted to start in Nairobi. Yet we have over 13 counties that don't even have access to the grid. So Waziri, in terms of specific measures that you are taking to lower the cost of production, and specifically the cost of electricity to match the region, what is your government doing?
Senator Onyonka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And CS John Buddy, I'm happy this is the first time I've actually been in this house when you've come here ever since the President appointed you. So I wanted to congratulate you for your job. The question I wanted to ask, Mr. Speaker, is that he has raised the issue of the debt stock ratio vis-a-vis the GDP. As the CS is aware, I think the President has announced that the Kenyan government is now going to build an airport costing $2.5 billion US. And I wanted just the CS to either come to the House and tell us, is he willing to give us the data, the information, and the agreements which have been signed, how much in real value this airport is going to cost, who are the beneficiaries of this airport construction, and what are the details? I believe that this House, as the Senate, is entitled to receive that information so that we can tell our Kenyan people, because we don't want another Adani to be what we are fighting about in our republic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a quick one on the response to question number 29, part C. CS, allow me to say I'm happy to hear that you are developing a mechanism to be able to link debt to development outcomes. The question that I am asking, Mr. Speaker, is if that mechanism does not exist today, with the trillions of shillings that we are borrowing almost on a monthly basis, how is Treasury able to measure the impact of the money borrowed so far, if, in the words of the CS, a mechanism is now being developed for future use? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at least the CS has finally appeared before this Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mine is a quick one. Waziri, through the Speaker, of these 12.84 trillion Kenya shillings, I have seen you have indicated domestic debt will be is 7.06 trillion Kenya shillings. External debt is 5.79 trillion shillings. Mr. Waziri, what is the total debt that the President Uhurukenyatta borrowed between 2013 and 2022? So that we don't lump under President William Ruto that there is imagination that President William Ruto has borrowed 12.8 trillion. So how much was borrowed by President Uhurukenyatta's government from 2013 to 2022? And what is the impact that was borrowed in terms that can be attached to projects, including SGR, among others? Waziri, can you shed light on that? I thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a serious question. Why is Wabua
Thank
laughing?
you, Senator Cherargei. Senator Abbas.
Thank you.
Order, senators. Cherargei, take your seat. Take your seat, Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mine is actually a concern that from response of the Waziri, some of the interventions actually outlined is agriculture and forestry and fishing. But of course, a larger economy that is actually been driven by the livestock sector, where 10 million people are surviving on, has not been mentioned. So what is the position that why is it that the focus is only agriculture, also the agriculture remains the backbone? And then you see provision of subsidies of fertilizers, seeds, expansion of rehabilitation of irrigation, promotion of climate resilience, support of agro-processing, nothing on livestock. What is the position?
Thank you, Senator. Cabinet Secretary, you may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think Senator Jenda has left, but I would not have any problem having a cup of tea with him in my office just to maybe discuss into more details my budget speech, and I'll be able to break it down. But then, on issues that are raised by Eddie, Senator Eddie, through the Speaker, our revenue performance has been underperforming. Revenue collection has been underperforming. And every year we are reporting shortfall in revenue collection. As a matter of fact, there was a time this country was collecting 18% of its GDP as revenue. Today we are collecting well over 14.5%, around 14.5% of GDP as ordinary revenue. And that is even below the two. We have a feeling we can collect up to 20 or 22% of GDP. However, there are a number of reasons. One of them is the inefficiency and of the systems that are deployed by Kenya Revenue Authority, which we are working on, and we have allocated quite a bit of resources, 17 billion, in the supplementary budget that was passed by National Assembly, supplementary budget number 1, to be able to revamp and re-engineer their systems. A lot of reforms are taking place, and we are already seeing some reported progress in terms of personal income tax. But also, it must be understood that a lot of businesses are becoming more and more informal, and collecting taxes from the informal sector is not easy. And a lot of businesses are going digital, and again, collecting taxes in that space is not easy. But we are trying to keep pace with that. So that is creating a bit of a strain on our fiscals, and but we are still working very hard to manage. In terms of crowding out private sector, we are being very careful not to crowd out private sector. Again, I want to also point out that our capital market is fairly developed. I think that is one thing that has not been appreciated. Kenya has one of the most developed financial sector and capital sector. And the challenge that private sector has been facing in terms of accessing credit is not entirely on availability of funds. It is informed by a number of reasons. And we have seen, in fact, before this war in the Middle East, the private sector had picked up in terms of credit uptake from the banks. There was a time last year, there was a negative growth of 2.7%. It had picked up to well over 6%. The truth is, before this war in the Middle East, the PMI, the Purchasers Managers Index, which measures the ability of demand in the economy and people's purchasing power and how we are buying goods, was rising steadily. And it was not us reporting, but by independent evaluators. So, again, we were hit. But again, I want to just say that we are being careful not to crowd out private sector. But again, external borrowing has also its risks. Look at what happened in 2024. Because of the depreciation of the shilling, we added to our debt stock almost 1 trillion shillings without taking even a single penny as a loan. And those are the things that we want to also try to avoid. On issue that has been raised by Senator Sifuna, I don't want to go into other details, but just to focus on the issue of cost of energy. What we have said here is that the government has prioritized stabilization of electricity supply. Before you go to the costs, the first thing is to guarantee supply, because if there is no supply, the cost will definitely be high. You cannot have cost coming down. The basic principle of microeconomics, the demand and supply, the equilibrium of prices, Senator Sifuna. The equilibrium of prices simply means where the supply curve and the demand curve intersect. And so when the demand rises and supply comes down, prices will automatically go up, because that intersection point will be high. But you must guarantee supply. Then the cost. How do we guarantee the cost, and what interventions have the government taken? One of the reasons why we have National Infrastructure Fund, Mr. Speaker, is because we want to implement resources towards generating more energy. Our energy requirement in this country is almost 10,000 megawatts. But we are only generating, well, slightly over 3,000, almost a third. So we therefore need to put more resources to generate more energy. It will deal with the twin issues of supply and cost at the same time, because demand will relatively remain constant. Or even if demand is going to adjust, it's going to adjust slightly. This morning, I had an engagement, a meeting with my counterpart in the energy, the Ministry of Energy, where we were discussing the nuclear power in Siaya, which is likely to generate well over 2,000 megawatts. And that is a project that we want to pursue to bring more power into the grid, because that is the only way through which we can guarantee cost of power to be low. I agree it is high, and also the supply and the reliability of the power. Because again, if you go to many parts of this country, the reliability of power is a challenge. Now, on the question of Nairobi being prioritized, and I want to again say, Mr. Speaker, Nairobi produces almost 60% of the GDP of this country. And that is not a place you can ignore. That's a place that we must invest in terms of providing energy. On Senator Onyonka, I know it has been reported that JKIA is going to cost about 2.9 billion, figures flying around. I saw 2.9 billion US dollars. The figure that I know is half of that, 1.2. And so you don't rely on figures that are flying around, and especially in some print media, some specific newspapers, because of course some newspapers for 3 years now, their headline are always consistent and predictable. So we don't worry much about those ones, because they have also a responsibility to inform or misinform Kenyans. But that, I will tell you, is not going to put any strain on our sovereign debt. And if you want the information about that, either my counterparts at the transport can provide that information, or the government, even through me, can provide that information. But this is one of the candidates for the National Infrastructure Fund. And I will tell you that there will be no sovereign debt as of now that would be put here. On Senator Wambua, what have we been using to link debt to development? Senator Wambua, I don't know whether he has left, but is here. Maybe I thought your height was, I thought you had no, let me reserve that. I couldn't see you. Maybe the problem is my height or your height, but anyway, either of the two. Now, Mr. Speaker, imagine what Senator Wambua is saying. Imagine from independence we didn't have it. Now we are implementing it. I think that is something you should praise this government for. We are doing exactly that. It has not been there. So we are doing it, because we can't continue complaining. Senator Cherargei, I want to persuade ourselves from just comparing the absolute numbers of debts.
Senator Wambua, I did guide the House that I will only take intervention once he has completed answering all the questions. Proceed, Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, so on Senator Cherargei, sorry, my brother, I wanted to persuade ourselves from comparing absolute numbers. Actually, the best way to measure debt is to look at the debt sustainability through what we call the present value of debt to GDP. That is what the capacity of debt, a country in paying, or sovereign in paying its debt. Look, if you look at the debt, the American, the US government, the debt they have, it's mind-boggling, but they are able to deal with it because it's a big economy. Our debt as a country, you can't compare to another neighboring country. I don't want to mention names. It may be a diplomatic issue. But the bottom line is this. When you talk of 1.8 billion, or trillion debt, when Kibaki left office, it should be understood that Kibaki left a low-income economy, where we were borrowing money under concessional terms. Kenya has graduated to a middle-income economy. You can no longer borrow under concessional terms like it used to happen during Kibaki government. Yes, President Uhuru left about 9 trillion in terms of debts. So that is in the 10 years that it worked. But you should understand that that debt, look at it in terms of the value of the shilling then. If you were to subject the debt in terms of US dollars and you apply the exchange rate today, you may find that President Uhuru Kenyatta left debt which was not 9 trillion. It could even be 11 trillion to date because of the current exchange rate. So that is why when I see professionals trying to compare in terms of absolute numbers, I ask myself, really, did we go through the same schools or not? But I want to be very careful there and say that yes, President Uhuru left, or his administration left about 9 trillion shillings if you converted it into shillings in terms of debt, both domestic and external. And now it is 12.8 trillion. And by the way, some of these debt service costs is as a result of some expensive debts that were taken before that we are servicing today. But again, even this government, there will be a government which will come in, which will service their debt. So it is not an excuse for government to say that because another government took up debts that we cannot pay. We have to. I saw another presidential candidate talking of we should not pay debts. I wonder how he would manage a country which has defaulted in debt. You can't. I mean, it's basic knowledge. Unless you want to manage chaos. So I'm wondering whether some of us who are talking of leading this country, they are really prepared in terms of understanding the economy. But I will tell you for a fact that debt is a concern. We have dealt with one issue of debt. When I came into this office, and it was worse when President Ruto came in, the question was not even about debt, the debt stock, the debt cost. It was about debt sustainability and whether we were going to be able to pay our debts. I have repeated this severally, Mr. Speaker, that in 2021, IMF had classified Kenya among 5 other countries for default. And we have survived it. So that is the first step. Now the next step is to manage the debt. And I want to conclude by saying, let no one lie to Kenyans that we will be reducing our debt stock. What we can reduce is debt to GDP ratio, which is now at 69, but it is 66 in present value terms. We should go to 55% in present value terms. Once we go to 55% of present value terms, debt becomes sustainable. There is no country in the world which will reduce its debt stock. Let no one cheat you. Anyone who speaks that, Mr. Speaker, is ignorant of economic matters. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, Honorable Senators, Cabinet Secretary, Order, Senators. Cabinet Secretary, I want to thank you for coming to respond. There is only one question by Abbas, which I'll be asking him to visit your office on the livestock issue that he raised, which has not been responded to. Thank you, and you're free to leave, Cabinet Secretary. Honorable Senators, it is now 1 p.m. Time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until later today, Wednesday 17th, June 2026 at 2:30 p.m.
Honorable members, Mr. Speaker. Mheshimiwa Bunge, na tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na mabunge kosoa wa jamii na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu, tukusihi tutazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao unataka kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri hii yetu. Kwa kuomba tuteremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa, na tujalie tuyatenda kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi hii yetu, na wale ambao hadha zao umezikabidhi kwa mikononi mwetu. Amina. Let's have the quorum bell ring for 10 minutes.
regulation